Greetings from the Elders Quorum Presidency. I'm Randall Malin, second counselor in the new Elders Quorum Presidency, that is, and I've been asked to provide a brief message to the members of the quorum. I thought first I'd give a little background information about myself, as even though we've lived in this ward for over 5 years now, I feel like there's still many of you who I don't know real well, and it's likely you don't know me real well. So just a little background information. We've lived in the Clovis area now for 30 years. I've got 4 children, my wife Paula. My 4 children are at various stages of their lives. So we've kind of lived through a period of time that has spanned quite a few years, from our first child to our last child. 3 of the oldest children are married and have families of their own. My youngest daughter, Natalie, is still here living with us and is a junior in college. I should mention that I have 11 grandchildren from my 3 oldest children, and things are good. And after 10 years of college and postgraduate work and 30 years of private practice in orthodontics, I retired. I sold my practice earlier this year, before the whole COVID pandemic hit, and it's caused me to reflect and think a little bit about my life and what I have accomplished and what I might yet accomplish. And I think for all of us at various times we consider what are the things that make us the happiest, and what is it that we should be doing to have a full and happy life that we can look back on and feel like we've accomplished what we were meant to accomplish, and that it was joyful going through the process. Well, there are a lot of reasons why we can get sidetracked from that feeling of joy and happiness throughout our lives. Conflict and challenges and obstacles seem to be varied and numerous on the path through life. And so I thought I would do a little bit of research and look at some of the factors that studies have looked at that make a difference in our lives. And I wanted to share that with you today and leave you with a few thoughts. Some 80 years ago, Harvard began a study of a group of men. These were Harvard sophomores, 1938. About 270 men began this extensive and long-lasting study that goes on to this day to determine what makes somebody happy and healthy through the various stages of life. Later on, some years later, in fact it was not until the 1970s, they included another cohort or group of men, which by the way in the initial studies it did not include women or necessarily children. But in the 1970s they took a group of men and boys who were in the poorest of neighborhoods in the Boston area. About 450 of these individuals were included in the study and followed in a longitudinal way to determine what in their lives occurred at various events and at various experiences, and then to question them and interview them every 2 years to ask about their health and some very personal questions about the relationships that they've had in their lives and their level of fulfillment and happiness. And as the years have gone on, there have been numerous directors of this study because it's been 80 years. The original directors and clinical scientists have died. Well, they're on the 4th director, a guy named Dr. Waldinger is a psychiatrist. And if you are interested, you can go to your internet browser and type in TED Talks Happiness, and you'll see. It's one of the most listened to TED Talks. It's pretty brief. It's very much a synopsis of this study given a couple of years ago, I believe, by this psychiatrist who is the director of the study. But some really interesting things came out of this study, and I thought I would share that with you. Through the years, and I can't go into depth about all the details, but a few things that they determined that were the major factors in the level and degree of health and happiness that these men from all backgrounds, by the way. Let me first start by saying recently they did a survey of millennials, and they asked a question as to what their goals were in life, what their main goals were that they would like to accomplish. 80% of those who were surveyed said that their goal, number one goal, was to be rich. That probably doesn't come as a surprise to you that many would say that. 50% of those surveyed, in addition to being rich, also said that they wanted to acquire fame in their chosen careers. So I don't know that that's changed much over the years, but I think for many people that's their impression of what can result in the greatest joy and happiness is fame and monetary success as being a key to their happiness. In fact, that wasn't true at all in this study. Through the years, studying both Harvard graduates who clearly had a bit of an upper hand in terms of a start on life versus the very, very poor young people and men that they studied years later in the other study group. The fact is that consistently it did not show that the level of income or the level of fame had any bearing on health, physical, emotional, and mental health, and as well as their self-reported level of fulfillment and happiness. What are the things that made the most difference? Physical activity, that they stayed physically active, number one. Actually, these are not in order of importance. It's just 6 things that made the biggest difference. So continued physical activity, the absence of abuse of alcohol and smoking, to be at a healthy weight. I'm not sure exactly what healthy is in this study, but that was what was mentioned. To have a stable marriage and family relationship. They did find a difference for the younger cohort to have increased education, because increased education had a direct influence on the level of alcohol abuse and smoking, which was interesting. So it's more of an indirect effect than a direct effect, education. It's the absence of alcohol abuse and smoking that is why it had a significant effect. And then the last thing was to have mature mechanisms to deal with the many challenges that life presented. I'm not going to go into detail what all that meant, but to distill it down into just a couple of things, however, consistently what came about through the study and ongoing study is that the quality of the relationships that these people had was by far the primary determinant of their physical as well as their mental, emotional health and their level of happiness. So their close family relationships, marriage, children, grandchildren, and extended family, their friends, and also those in the community in which they associated, their community connections and relationships, was by far the greatest determinant of these factors. A key finding of this study, as they looked at these various factors involved, showed that loneliness was maybe one of the largest ongoing issues that affected the well-being of the study participants. In fact, the quote is that loneliness is toxic. I should say that when they made these measurements, it wasn't always just about interviewing people and getting their perceived responses. They have done and continue to do very close studies with their physical health by doing biannual blood draws. They do brain scans. They've done MRIs. They look very deeply at the physical effects on the bodies as these study participants have aged. And this issue of not being connected to family, friends, and community, and more specifically, loneliness amongst individuals. And that loneliness doesn't necessarily mean they don't have friends or don't have family connections, because people can be lonely in a crowd. That is to say that the quality of the relationships is what really makes the determination as to how people fared in both their subjective responses and the objective responses that the study was able to determine. In fact, in their report, 1 out of 5 of the study participants expressed extreme loneliness at times throughout the study. It was shown that those who had good quality relationships had brain scans that showed a much more positive result, and in fact, it related to memory loss. They found that those who were more lonely and had less quality relationships lost their brain functioning earlier on, and their memory function became much more diminished when compared to others in the study who had better relationships in their lives. So what are the things that we can learn from this? Well, one of the take-homes for me that I thought was really important was to realize that fortune and fame are not part of the equation for finding that joy and happiness that we all seek and want in our lives. But in fact, it's the relationships along the way at home, with our friends, at work, in the communities in which we live. Fostering those relationships are what's important, and to understand that all the time and effort that we spent in the pursuit of life and the challenges that it presents to us, with whether it be schooling, work, and just dealing with the varieties of what challenges present themselves to us at different stages of our lives. It's actually the people in our lives that we should be spending time and effort in developing and cultivating those relationships, because at every stage of life, that's the primary indicator of the level of joy and happiness and health that we enjoy. Now, how does that relate to a gospel principle? Well, the very essence of the gospel is to provide service. And in providing service, we not only enrich the lives of others, but we enrich our own lives. We can't help but bring greater joy and happiness in our lives as we extend ourselves out to other people. And it doesn't have to be another thing that we add to the many lists of things that we do. It's just as we go through the regular occurrences that we have in our lives, that we look for opportunities to extend ourselves. Me making this video is an extension for me. It's outside my comfort zone, and sometimes that's what we have to do, is to go outside our comfort zones in little ways, to provide little acts of service for those who we don't know where they're at in their lives. But sometimes a friendly smile, a little assist here and there, using the special skills and talents and abilities that we each have in our lives, can go a great way in enriching the lives of others, and in so doing enrich our own lives. I wanted to read to you and end with this, a quote from our manual from years ago from Presidents of the Church. This is teachings of President Hinckley. And I'm going to quote to you his comment about this. My message to you today is that you resolve to dedicate a part of your time as you map out your life's work to those in distress and need with no consideration of recompense. Your skills are needed, whatever they may be. Your helping hands will lift someone out of the mere of distress they are in. Your steady voice will give encouragement to some who might otherwise simply give up. Your skills can change the lives in a remarkable and wonderful way of those who walk in need. If not now, when? If not you, who? May the real meaning of the gospel distill into your hearts that we may realize that our lives given us by God our Father are to be used in the service of others. If we will give service, our days will be filled with joy and gladness. I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.